Hello, everybody. Jen here, City of Minot. Happy Independence. The holiday might be over, but the independence remains, which means you have the right to vote on August 5th. Our mayoral candidates have turned in financial disclosures at the end of the month. Absentee ballots were made available on June 26th. Anyone can vote absentee. It's a two-step process, application and ballot. You can complete it in one trip to the Ward County Administration Building. They're open during business hours until August 5th. There will not be early voting, but anyone can vote absentee. There are some frequently asked questions that I know I'm missing here, so there is a full set of information in the news section of our website at minotnd.gov. Another thank you to the organizations that have been hosting mayoral forums. The most recent was MAC EDC. Also, since last council meeting, the North Dakota Sons of Liberty Minot chapter hosted all 4 candidates. Earlier in June, the Spot hosted a meet and greet. The Dakotan hosted a debate. Plus, on mydakotan.com, they hosted individual interviews with each candidate. So you can find those videos at mydakotan.com. Be informed, vote August 5th. We have some of our own votes going on tonight. It's Minot City Council at 5:30. Be here in person, be here online. Live streams are available on YouTube, Facebook, and the Public Access Channel 19. We'll talk about the agenda here on the Minot Minutiae in just a few. Announcements first. Number 1, today starts the Minot Employee Appreciation Week. We're hosting a company picnic at Public Works on Wednesday. You're invited. And at 11:30 on Wednesday, we'll be celebrating our Employee Service Awards. We have about 450 full-time employees, and we'll be celebrating those who have served 5 years and up in 5-year increments, up to our guest of honor. Kevin has served our community for 30 years. We will also have a few days where food trucks will be parked in front of city facilities. All are welcome there too. Buy your own snacks, good conversation. We sure are grateful for our City of Minot employees. July 14th at 4:30, we will officially welcome Minot Police Department Chief Michael Fry. There is no Planning Commission meeting in July. August 12th will be the next time planning meets. And before we meet again here on the Minot Minutiae, we will be welcoming the North Dakota State Fair. Kicks off on Friday, July 18th, which means Saturday, July 19th. It's the North Dakota State Parade. There will be road closures in place that morning. Floats will line up on Broadway and walk East Burdick. Also on the announcement docket, we are in our budget process. Council and department heads went line by line. It took 3 days. Throughout those 3 days, there were many times that a percentage of completeness was assigned to the budget process. I heard halfway, back third. I'm pretty sure we said bottom of the 7th at one point. So I'm going to go with this measurement. We are on the last column of this graphic. Now, the last column does include the biggest decisions and presentations of the budget process, but last column nonetheless. We ended that 3-day process with directives and priorities from council. It's an hour long. It was live streamed in full. Here on the Minot Minutiae, I offer you a summary.
We have received presentations from all of the department heads, a little short presentation from the city manager showing us sort of some of the global topics that he is looking at with respect to finalizing the city manager's budget. Health insurance costs are usually not quite nailed down until closer to the time that we approve the budget. So there's a couple of those outlier things. Council is tasked with giving some direction.
When the staff has been in here showing us some of the areas that they're cutting from or looking to cut from, are you implementing those into your budget that you're going to bring to us?
We have a set number that we're trying to cut out of the budget, and so it's a variety of things. So I'm not likely to take many or all of the position cuts, but there may be other cuts, and those could have either been recommended either through the flat budget recommendations or the -3% recommendations or even some other things that weren't identified that as we as a management team looked at, that we felt that there was some trimming that could be done. And there may be some things in the 3% budget that we feel are transformational enough and create efficiencies that it's worth building into the budget. So it'll be a mix of all three of those that I'll be looking at to balance.
The one-offs that a number of department heads had identified where, hey, we didn't use this the last 2 years, or this was budgeted last year, we can cut it out. Those will all be coming out for the most part?
More than likely, a lot of the recommended cuts will be taken.
Perfect. Thank you.
So my first priority is public safety. This is imperative for everyone who lives in or visits Minot. Funding for staff, their training, and their needed equipment must be allocated. I'm in favor of looking more closely at a public safety sales tax. Other communities in North Dakota have passed the sales tax because their residents also believe that public safety is paramount. I do not support the elimination of positions unless it comes through attrition and a thorough discussion on the impacts of the lost position. I think we must make a commitment to the police department facility so that they and the public know what our next steps are. My second priority is to fairly compensate our employees. No city services take place without our employees. We have departments, particularly the police department, that are understaffed. This creates issues internally and externally. Delayed services to the public and undue stress on our employees are just a few of the impacts that we see when we are understaffed. To top it off, many of our staff have endured an unhealthy amount of scrutiny this year. As the employer, we have a responsibility to make sure that we provide for those who provide for our entire community. I do not support a merit-based salary increase system. This may work in the private sector, but it does not work in the public sector. After we had the initial discussion at the dais, I heard from numerous residents that said that this is the very best way to kill morale, resulting in a loss of employees. My third priority is a maintenance to our infrastructure. This comes in a variety of ways: taking care of our buildings, our streets, our equipment. Sometimes the investment seems high, but we see numerous instances where underfunding something only results in good money being spent after bad. We recently allocated funds for an upgraded sound system at the airport. Many of us view the terminal as a new building, so we have a hard time seeing those requests come before us. The reality is that budget constraints during construction of the terminal meant that some shortcuts were taken. Now we have to pay for things again. Even in the building that we sit in today, HVAC equipment had to be fixed or replaced because the original budget didn't allow for replacement. Guaranteed, most equipment will be more costly a few years down the road. Finally, on this subject, prior councils have allowed neighborhoods to go without sidewalks and have allowed developers to put in subpar roads. Years later, we are paying the cost of these decisions. In addition to that, I do support some funding for the VERF. While I believe it is not a long-term fix, I will support the use of reserves to pay down some of the necessary costs. This fear was shared with legislators during the session that if a cap was put in place, many taxing authorities would max out the cap. From what we have seen over the past 3 days, I think it is nearly impossible to not see at least a small property tax increase. It is important to note that all of our property owners will see a buy down from the state, so even with a small city increase, there will be fewer dollars out of the household budgets. And last but not least, I think we have to consider and possibly reconsider the amount of money that is allocated to outside agencies. Each request that we receive is an important part of a successful community, and oftentimes we see the dividends. But as we consider core and non-core activities, these requests should be considered non-core. If there is a way to fund the requests without an undue hardship to our taxpayers, I would support the allocations as requested.
There's been some thought in my mind about reconfiguring where we're at with our sales tax. I love the idea of dedicating resources towards public safety, but I think we might have to make decisions about other things that we're funding right now that maybe we want to take a different approach to or remove. And so I don't see that as an additional ½ cent. I see that as reconfiguring the ½ cent or the 2 cents that we've got today. So that's just some of my upfront thoughts. You know, my hope is that the hard work that's been done, this has set us up for a couple years now. We looked all the way out into 2028. And as we go through subsequent cycles of this, it's going to get better and better. And I think we're going to have a really good working relationship back and forth between staff and council about where we're headed with everything. So with all that in mind, I just want to throw out a few other things then that really struck me as we went through the last couple days. Number one of the other things I wanted to comment on real quickly is that this idea that the state has pushed down this 3% number. I mean, I've said this before. I was the one lone voice at the legislature in front of the House Tax and Finance Committee telling them what the problems were in this bill and where they were headed. The one voice. The League of Cities was a yes on it. They said, it's fine. Let's move forward. The Association of Counties was a yes on it. It's fine. Let's move forward. I was the only voice telling them that this was the kind of constraints it was going to put on everybody. I think everybody here understands that I am not a person who's for expanding the budget and going crazy in numbers. But this makes it much harder for us to do our job and do the people's work the way that we should. And that was my concern. And I made that very clear to the legislators, and they heard me. With that in mind, though, what I think is going to happen is most of the vast majority of the entities out there are going to raise their taxes by exactly the 3% because that's the new constraint. Now, keep in mind, for many of them, that is a cutback because they've been averaging much more than that. And so that's part of the legislature's thinking here. I do get concerned, though, if we get the mentality among us that, oh, the people are about to get a $1,600 break, we got a little room to up ours. That backfill concept has gotten us exactly where we are today. That's why we are in the situation that we are in, where the work that the legislature has already done has fallen on deaf ears, essentially, and it hasn't helped the people whatsoever. So we need to be very careful about that. A few other things that I noticed as we went through this process. One of the things that I really loved is that we saw some department heads start to embrace the idea that we don't have to plan for every rainy day in every single budget. The easiest example I can give people is that we don't plan for the 25-year peak of snow events. We can't plan that way. That's the wrong way to go about things, because when we don't spend that money and we drop it in the general fund and it sits as reserves and we keep going the next year with the same high levels, we don't need to be doing that. We need to set ourselves up in a good spot so that we've got what we think we'll need. And in a high year, yeah, we might have a budget amendment. We just went through a couple weeks ago, we just went through a discussion around what our reserve levels look like. The council decided that it didn't want to make any changes to that we're going to allow ourselves to be right up to the state requirement or the state law requirements of 75% of our general fund budget. Again, I can live with that. But as I said yesterday, what I believe that sets us up to do when we run healthy reserves is to run a much leaner budget. Because when our department heads come before us, we can feel good about saying, yep, you did the right thing, and you need a little extra for snow. We've got the reserves to take care of that. Let's get it done. Because at that point, we're making the right decision rather than telling the people, oh, by the way, we might have a big year, so we're going to need to collect extra snow money from you now in case we do. That's the wrong approach, in my opinion. And I think this heads us in the right direction if we follow through on that now. We can't do both sides. We can't say we need the higher budget because we might have a problem and keep healthy reserves. We need to do one or the other. If we've chosen this direction, then I expect us to move forward with it. So with that in mind, for this budget, what I'm hoping for is that the city manager's budget comes through and it looks pretty close to a flat budget. It looks within reason to a flat budget, keeps us underneath the 3% that we're allowed to use. And then what I'd really love to see us do is follow through on what the proposals that I brought last fall, which is to continue to pay down the overage that we already had. That was actually in excess of state law. The good news is that we've rectified that and we're on the right side of it going forward. But we do still have extra money that we've pulled from the people there. And then we take a look at simply in 2024, the extra money that we already collected. I'm still working through the annual financial report and I got some more work to do on it. But we're in another case where I'll say the same words that I normally say on this. We made a profit as a city again. We brought in more than we expended. And when we do that consistently, now from what I can see, that's at least year 8 in a row. When we do that, we've overcharged the citizens because we're not here to make a profit. And so we've got some monies to work with to buy down the property tax again and to continue that process. I can live with that. If we're going to do that consistently for a couple $1 million, but then we also do a buy down during that year, we can do that way forever. If that's how everybody feels more comfortable about it, as long as we're consistent, I can work with that. And so my hope is that we're able to do that. And so while, I understand people are going to get a break from the state, and that's a good thing, I expect us to be at or below what our levy was last year, once we do the buy down and once we do the things the way that we should for the people. A couple other very specific things. One of the things that I heard throughout from department heads, and this hits home for me because not only do I have an engineering background and I understand that world to a certain extent, my son is a CPA, and he's the head of our company. Without his CPA credential on the wall, we don't operate, literally. And he has continuing ed credits that need to be done every single year. That's the way that it works in that industry. There are many other industries. The city attorney talked about this. Lance talked about it. This is something that's got to happen across the board. What I would propose is that the city manager work with, whether it's HR or with the department heads, to come up with a policy for how we handle ongoing training that is required by credentialing, so that we have a great plan for that. Now, does my son go to a 5-day conference every year for his CPA? No. In fact, in the years we've owned the firm, he's never done that. But I would like to see him do that at some point, because I think he'll learn from that. But I think we could put people on a cycle where they might do the things online for a year, and then they might go to the conference the next year, because I think there is value in that. But I think it's really important that we handle that the same way across our departments, so that all of our professionals are given the same opportunities and they're given the same means to meet those requirements as we go. Another thing that I'll address, we know that there's a ton of wage pressure. I've said throughout this process that for me, the 5% was a tall order. And I think the department heads all saw that. When you got a big built-in 5% increase in wages plus the benefit increases, how in the world do you even get to flat? It's nearly impossible. And I think you guys all saw that. And that's why for me, I will continue to advocate for performance-based pay. If we come back with a budget this year that does 3% increases for our best people, the people that all of you absolutely cannot live without in your departments, 3% is not enough. I am behind you on that 100%. And that's why we can't make it across the board. We can't continue to do that, because we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot as we get leaner. And so I will implore you, we need to move to performance-based pay to make sure that we don't have to do that. Does that mean that there are a few that are going to get less than the number? Yes, it does. And I think you can identify who that should be and how you should go about that. We're good. We have a good set of leaders here that can work their way through that without any problem whatsoever. And so I appreciate that. I think it's something that we have to continue to move forward with. I look forward to seeing what our consultants have on that as we take a look at it. I guess the last thing that I'll just say, one of the other things that I did notice throughout was that there was places where there's different levels of admin staff throughout our departments. I think as I look back in previous budgets 10, 15 years ago, Mark, you probably remember some of these. I think at one time there was sort of an admin pool. It was actually budgeted as a separate division or section to a certain extent. And I'm not suggesting that we go back there, but one of the things that I do think that we want to continue to take a look at as among departments is what's the best way to utilize those resources.
My top priority is public safety, like most of us, I believe, should be. There's been talk the last couple of days about a 0.5-cent sales tax for police and fire or public safety. My proposal would be that we take the first penny of our sales tax and take the property tax relief portion, the economic development portion, and the improvements portion, and make that a public city or public safety sales tax. My reasoning for that is the property tax relief it's just a word on there. It goes back into spending anyway. We could designate that to public safety, and it is a reduction. It is a property tax relief at that point, because we're spending it on that and not taking it from property tax. Or we don't have to add more property tax. So that is my belief that is where we should go with this. I'm not for extending or adding new taxes. The other thing is the legislature did a $1,600 buy down for property tax. And I've heard many people, including the school board, that believes now they can collect more tax or add a levy for different things, or we can do more because but you have to remember that is just for primary residents. It's not for the businesses. It's not for the renters. As we raise it, they're going to get their taxes raised. I can't say that I agree it wasn't fair in how they did it, but that's the way it came out. So as we look at that, part of that is so that we wouldn't get taxed more and we'd get some relief. And now it seems like the local entities just want to add on to that, so then we're back to the way it was. So anyway, I think we have to start looking at our priorities as budgets get tougher. And we need to look at our staff, we need to look at our people, we need to look at what we should be doing for our citizens. I'm not for cutting staff on some of the proposals that were there, but we don't have to. We just need to be smart about it. So that's one reason why the sales tax, I think we just need to reallocate that to where it should be going, where our priority should be. And that's the services for the people and our employees.
All of your people that you guys worked with in your departments to do these budgets and bring these to us, you guys did a wonderful job. Like Mike said, I know it was tough. I know it isn't comfortable. And I just want to thank you from myself and from all the residents in Minot for doing it, because ultimately it's going to benefit them and us as a city.
I certainly agree with the prioritization of public safety. I agree with the prioritization of taking care of our employees. You know, when you've got a department where 83% of your budget is people, you don't have a lot of room to minus 3%, especially with some assumptions of incremental costs of people. So I compliment all the department heads who ground through this exercise. I think it was the best one that we've ever done, and a healthy exercise, so I appreciate that. A couple of thoughts that I had related to the overall approach were there are a lot of questions about where we should accept additional risk and where we shouldn't. And I think to Alderman Blessam's point, the idea that certainly you don't have to budget for the 100-year snow event every year, but there are gradations of where risk becomes acceptable and where we should, pay now so that we don't accept too much risk. I think there's also a question that the city manager alluded to a minute or two ago, and that is that do we avoid spending money in a current budget to gain the technology that would move us ahead to our own detriment? And so I think we have to consider that carefully as well. Sometimes by saying, well, we can put off upgrading that software, or we don't need to send somebody to training to learn how it's done today, isn't the right approach, because in doing so, we just continually lose ground, and sooner or later we end up with probably a larger expense and wishing that we would have made a different choice. So I think with those considerations and the ones that have already been mentioned, I think we're in a good position to look forward to the city manager's budget and then take it from there.
I stated it before, my priority, I think, with this budget, when we talk about the constraints that we have, is taking care of what we have, and that's our employees. Pay and benefits to me is paramount. When it comes to a merit-based pay system, I'm hot and cold on it. I don't know if that's the right way or not. I need to see more. I've heard concerns and I've heard benefits. So I guess that's just something we'll have to get more information on. Mike did a great job, and one of the notes that I have was training and staff, and we heard about the efficiencies, whether that's going to the conferences and finding out that you can, we can buy refurbished buses. We don't have to go with new buses, and these different options. Brian Banfield highlighted some of the efficiencies that were located from some of these trainings that save real dollars for taxpayers. So again, I think continuing to engage in training for our staff and making sure that they have opportunities to advance, not only with the city of Minot, maybe it's for another organization. That's nothing we should shy away from. We shouldn't be afraid of training our staff to move on. One of the things we talked about was cutting, if we cut certain projects, one of the ones that jumps out today was sidewalks. Should we allocate those funds to other things? When we look at the priorities and the citizen satisfaction survey, some of those things were top priorities for citizens. I think if we remove those, we should give that money back. We shouldn't tax people for it. And we should save those funds for citizens. Public safety sales tax, I'm on board with having that discussion. Measure 4 put us on that track. That was part of the package that was Measure 4. If it did pass, was that municipalities and cities have alternate ways to generate revenue, whether that was through special assessments, whether that was through fees, pay for service, whether it was through sales tax. I'm not a fan of sales tax, to be honest with you. I think it adversely affects lower income individuals, but it is something that has to be considered. So again, Measure 4 honestly would have expedited that conversation versus what the legislature has enacted. So, and then we talk about reallocating, sales tax. I'm going to be an advocate. I think everybody knows me well enough that I'm going to be an advocate for economic development. Any good business owner knows that when times are tough, you don't get out of your marketing. You don't reduce that line item. That's something that you probably have to even invest more into at times if it allows it, because that's how you grow your business. That's how you generate more revenue. That and like Alderman Blessum has stated, we maybe don't have a revenue problem. Maybe we have a spending problem. Well, I don't think that doesn't mean that we can't look for new revenues. We can't look to boost our sales tax, and that's what some of those relationships and those partnerships do. So again, it's I just don't want to see us undercapitalize our efforts, because I think we put ourselves in a bind and we start to move backwards. And again, this process, if nothing else, I think the staff have done this in the past. They've gone through these scenarios. They understand, they run a good budget. They follow the direction of council. This was the direction that we asked for, and they delivered. But I think it also goes back to what Finance Director Dave Lakefield has said at every budget process that I've been a part of, and that is you need to manage your budgets. Just because you have funds doesn't mean you have to spend them. So again, and I think to the testament of our reserves, that's been happening. Our department heads have found cost savings throughout the year. They haven't spent those funds to where we've been able to have that cushion for some of these unseen and unprecedented expenditures or unprecedented world events, whether it was the boom or the bust that we went through, whether it was COVID-19, those things, we protected the city from some of those things. And are there efficiencies, not budgeting for a 100-year snow event? Absolutely. I think those are things and those are steps that I'm fully behind. So again, I like the process. It parlays itself and it sets us up to have some really good discussions over the next few months.
Thank you.
We're going to get back into the agenda. Buckle up. This one could be a long night. We have 21 items in the consent agenda. A few that could be of note. NAS. It is not a water on date. Sorry. Utilities Director Jason Sorensen simplified this item to who pays who and when. It's North Dakota State Water Commission, North Dakota Department of Water Resources, Minot Water Treatment Plant. This is the adoption of a 7-page agreement, who pays who and when, on the front side of treatment. We also have user groups on the back side of treatment. Men's Winter Refuge. The property belongs to the city, so the shelter operates year by year on a dollar lease for the property. We'll be taking a look at an MOU between the fire department and the Minot Air Force Base. This MOU allows fire to work with the 5th Civil Engineer Squadron for the EMS bike patrols at the North Dakota State Fair, fills community hours for emergency personnel out on base, and Minot Fire builds relationships and avoids overtime. So overall, the community wins. Another item on the agenda is Perkett Ditch improvements. This is a flood protection related project. However, it's paid for through the stormwater maintenance account. This is to move stormwater from the Perkett area to the other side of the railroad track. The bid did come in 40% higher than expected at $177,230. Should be complete by October. Quinton Burdick Job Corps is back on the agenda, this time for a continuation of an MOU with Minot Police Department. NDPER's retirement plan, HR is proposing that dispatch be included in the enrollment of public safety retirement plan. CDBG and MPO, our favorite federal alphabet soup, both have comment periods, public comment periods that are currently open. Both are pinned on our homepage, minotnd.gov. Community Development Block Grants, they're doing the footwork for Engle Court, which would add 72 units of low to moderate income housing. Engle Court is a $37 million project. CDBG is looking for permission to help out with about $500,000. So it's privately funded. CDBG federal dollars would be applied because of the LMI portion of the project. That public comment is open through the 18th. Metropolitan Planning Organization, they've identified $375 million worth of improvements that we'd like to make to transportation in our greater Minot area. This includes Burlington and Surrey. MPO is asking if we only can fund $150 million worth, where do we start? There's not funding directly associated with it yet, but we're looking for priorities is what this comes down to. So they have examples like road diets, multimodal facilities along Broadway for pedestrians and bicyclists, some county road adjustments. The MPO is all about how you get where you're going and connecting our greater Minot area. So let them know what you know. The link is available on our homepage, minotnd.gov. That brings us to action items. 7.1 is Broadway Circle, to be operated by Pathfinder Services of North Dakota. This will reassign commercial leases for Oshi Ramen and the Lord's Cupboard to Pathfinder Services. 7.2, bids are back for the columbarium expansion at Rose Hill Cemetery. 7.3 is a flood protection item. There have been public meetings for MI 8 and 9. SRJB is looking for approval to acquire 4 properties downstream from the zoo. 7.4 updates our policy on public comment. This is the result of a state legislature discussion. Our policies on public appearances have been more liberal than what the new legislative guidelines are, and for the most part, we're going to be keeping that. Something that we did like in the North Dakota League of Cities recommendation was the use of speaker cards so that we have your name and address because it's not always said out loud at the mic. It's also proposed that comments relate to agenda items, that we stick to 5 minutes. It's proposed to limit the total time to 30 minutes for public appearances. There's manners that are outlined in the memo. Anyway, 7.5 is the facade improvement program and approval for 110 East Central Avenue. Action item number 7.6. This is at 6th Street Southwest, south of 11th Avenue Southwest. We talked about this on social media this week. That intersection near Jim Hill. 11th got new paint. 6th Street is still a little wide for a 4-way stop. Engineering is proposing an adjustment to parking south of 11th before we can put in a gore lines, hash lines that will squeeze traffic into the middle. So we have that parking modification first, paint approval next, should be done by the fall. 7.7, a proposed job description and classification of deputy police chief. On to public appearances, and we have 3 presentations in miscellaneous and discussion. Number 1, airport traffic plan of the land side of the terminal. Number 2, should Minot have a local preference when bidding construction projects? And number 3, charitable gaming site authorization policy. This is also in response to the state legislature, a discussion that took place with the state legislature. That's plenty. That's the agenda. Vote on August 5th. Let's bring this full circle. The vote to declare independence from Britain actually took place on July 2nd. On that day, 12 of 13 colonies voted for it. New York abstained. The Declaration of Independence was signed by 56 men. Most of the delegates, 50 most likely, signed on August 2nd. The remaining 6 signed over the next few months. Delaware delegate signed last in January. We celebrate on July 4th because the Declaration was printed in the papers on July 4th, 1776. Gratitude for the information assist goes to the National Park Service. It's not a Declaration of Independence level, but it is a big vote. August 5th, auditorium 7 to 7, absentee ballots available now until August 5th. We'll see you at the Minot City Council meeting tonight at 5:30. That's the Minot Minutia.